Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. This is Rappler Talk. Joining us today is Peter Boothcart. He is with Human Rights Watch, and here is their new report on the Philippines. The title is License to Kill. Peter, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
What did you find in this long report that you've released?
Yes, this is the result of an investigation that we began in October and completed in January. We investigated many of the killings which are taking place. And what we found is, first of all, that a lot of the killings which take place during so-called buy-bust operations are not actually shootouts with the police and the suspects, as the police claim, but are actually extrajudicial killings, where people are already under the control of the police and are then shot dead, and then evidence is sometimes planted on their bodies afterwards. And the second category of cases involves the so-called vigilante killings. And what we found there is that those killings also are carried out by the police or with the complicity of the police. We have some cases in the report where people were actually taken into police custody, taken to a local police station or a barangay office, and then later found dead in a vigilante-style killing with their heads wrapped in plastic under those kind of circumstances. And what we conclude after our research is that it's simply impossible in the kind of high density, low income neighborhoods of Manila that these killings are taking place without the complicity of the police.
The Philippine police claims that this is its drug war, that the people they have killed, and as of the end of January, it was more than 7,000 people killed, but they claim only about 3,000 were killed by the police in police operations. They claim these people fought back against them. Is that correct?
According to our investigation, in the cases we investigated, it certainly is not the case that these individuals fought back against the police or that they were even armed. According to the eyewitnesses and the circumstances that we investigated, these were people who were under the physical control of the police. Oftentimes they were begging for their lives. Most often the police asked family members to leave the room or neighbors to leave the area, and then these individuals were simply shot dead, execution style. And oftentimes guns were placed at the scene of the crime to make it appear like this was a confrontation when it actually was not.
And from what you've seen, what is the point of this? This is utter impunity, the way you're describing it. What's the point of this killing?
Well, we should remember that even before he ran for president, Duterte warned the people of the Philippines. He said, "Don't push me to run for president because tens of thousands of people will be killed. The fish in Manila Bay will grow fat off the people we will kill." He told people to open funeral parlors and said that he would supply the bodies. So the police are simply carrying out the policy that President Duterte announced during election campaign and afterwards continues to incite the police to carry out a policy of killing of drug dealers and drug suspects.
And what's the incentive from your investigation? What's the incentive for members of the police to actually kill this many people? This is more people than died during martial law.
Well, this is double the number of people who died during Marcos's martial law, and they've been killed over a period of 6 months. I think what's really important for the people of the Philippines to understand, and this is a report which we wrote for the people of the Philippines, first and foremost, is that this is not a war on drug dealers. The vast majority of the people who've been killed come from extremely poor communities and are mostly occasional drug users. They're rickshaw drivers and porters at the port. They work extremely difficult jobs trying to support their families. And they're the primary victims of this policy. We have cases in our report where the actual drug dealers just paid a bribe to the police to be left alone or to even be released from custody while the poor have been killed. That's clear.
Other news groups, Amnesty International, have come out and said that the police are paid for each killing. Did you find something similar?
You know, Human Rights Watch has been investigating these drug killings since Mindanao, since President Duterte was a mayor in Davao.
That's correct.
And in those cases, we did find that payments were made by city governments to the so-called death squads. We do not establish this in this case, but certainly it is quite possible that financial motives are involved in some of these killings. And certainly, you know, there's the well-known case of the South Korean businessman
Correct.
the police tried to extort. But we have many other cases in our report where the police extorted bribes from families to get people released from their custody.
It's good that you reminded me. Human Rights Watch did do an investigation in the Davao death squad. What did you find then?
We found that there were links between the Davao city government and the death squads which carried out those killings. And that this was a policy of the Davao city government under Duterte to kill drug suspects. And not just in Davao, many other cities in Mindanao copied the same kind of policies before Duterte took it nationally.
How is it that now President Duterte keeps saying that he's been cleared of these charges?
He absolutely has not. There never has been a credible investigation into what happened in the city of Davao. And there simply has not been an investigation because of the level of intimidation which exists in the Philippines right now. When one of his most fervent critics, Senator de Lima, is framed on politicized charges and thrown in jail after the president threatened that she would rot in jail for criticizing some of his policies, we have to understand that there's a real level of intimidation in Filipino society. And not just towards the senators, but also in the judiciary, in the press, in civil society as a whole. The Philippines for a long time have been one of the most vibrant civil societies in Asia. And we very much see that civil space closing for the media and for civil society today.
Why is it that Filipinos have stayed quiet through the killings of this? I mean, again, from July 1 to January 31, you're talking about more than 7,000 people killed. In your mind, in your investigation, why are people not up in arms about this?
You know, it is a bit of a paradox that a country which has such strong Catholic beliefs seems to care so little about 7,000 of its fellow Filipinos being killed. I think there's several reasons. One is the fact that almost all of these victims come from extremely marginalized and poor communities. So while these communities are absolutely being terrorized at the moment, there's nightly killings, night after night after night in these neighborhoods. Many of the middle-class neighborhoods or upper-class neighborhoods are simply not affected. But also, many Filipinos do not know the truth about what is actually happening in their country. Because President Duterte has sold them the story that the Philippines has descended into the hell of drug dependency. In the same way that President Trump in the United States is trying to sell the American people on the lie that they're being threatened by Syrian and other refugees who want to come and carry out terrorist attacks. So Duterte has created the drug problem, and then he's offered the solution, which is to kill the drug users. But in fact, if you look at it objectively, the Philippines does not have a more serious drug problem than many other nations. Actually, drug use of amphetamines in Australia is twice as high as the Philippines. So first we should analyze the problem based on the facts. The Philippines has a challenge with drug use, certainly, but so do many other countries in the world. And the way to address those challenges and that problem is through the rule of law. You can investigate and arrest drug users. You can offer rehabilitation to drug users, but you cannot simply kill them in the streets.
This kind of impunity that you're describing, I mean, this is unheard of in the Philippines. Again, I go back to why are not more Filipinos up in arms? I mean, you've mentioned intimidation. Are people afraid or they just don't know? One of the things we've seen is a very strong popular support for President Duterte. How do you put all these together?
You know, we have the rise of this kind of populism across the world. Populist leaders who reject the rule of law.
Yeah.
We have it with Donald Trump, we have it with President Duterte. But they try to sell people on a false story about what is happening in their country. I do think that Filipinos are waking up to the reality of the implications of some of the policies pursued by Duterte, because they now realize more and more every day that it's not just about targeting drug dealers, but also a lot of poor people are affected, the press is affected, and civil society as a whole is affected. Because the real danger here is if you give the police a license to kill,
Right.
if you turn the police into murderers, who is going to be safe in the Philippines tomorrow?
Right.
And one of the really troubling findings of our report is that it's not just the police who are involved in these killings. It's also the local barangay officials who are drawing up the watch lists,
Yep.
and who are going with the police to people's houses and deciding who surrendered and who didn't surrender, and who is cooperating and not cooperating. So we have a whole killing system which is developing in this country outside the rule of law.
A license to kill. And that is the
Yes.
topic of your report. Your best case and your worst case scenarios.
You know, I hope that with this pause in the drug war, the country will reconsider its policies, that President Duterte will bring a stop to these killings, and that we can the Philippines can re-engage with the international community. There is a lot of support by the international community to help the Philippines address the challenges it faces. The challenges it faces in terms of development, as an extremely poor country in many ways, the challenges it faces with drugs, and the challenges it faces with security. But if President Duterte continues with these policies, it makes it a lot more difficult for the European Union to provide police training, for example,
Yeah.
and for the international community to offer development assistance to the Philippines. So our worst case scenario is that these policies continue and that the army gets involved in the killings. We all know the history of the army in the Philippines in terms of extrajudicial killings, and this could get a lot worse.
We know that President Duterte has been courting the military since the day he took office, since before. The man who ran as his vice president, Senator Peter Cayetano, just over the weekend actually said on the 31st anniversary of People Power, there was a counter rally, a rally to support Duterte. He said that the drug war should continue again because drugs are proliferating, that it is getting worse, methamphetamine use. I mean, what do you make of this? Why would a senator actually call for more killings?
Well, because they are calculating that they can continue to get public support with these very hardline policies. What we're pointing out is that these policies are unlawful, that many of the people who are being killed are innocent. Well, actually, all of them are innocent in the sense that they've never been
Until
brought
proven guilty.
before
Right,
a judge.
right, they weren't proven.
That they have no chance to challenge the evidence against them. And we're also telling President Duterte that there will be criminal consequences for his actions. Not just for President Duterte, but also for the officials who implement these policies and who prevent any meaningful investigations from taking place. This is really undermining the standing of the Philippines in the international community. I was in Geneva just last week doing a briefing for the ambassadors at the Human Rights Council, and our room was overflowing with ambassadors interested in what is happening in the Philippines. So there will be some real international consequences.
Can you talk
coming.
about the criminal consequences for President Duterte and for officials implementing, executing this?
Yeah. First of all, we should be very clear. This is a policy on which President Duterte ran for president.
He was elected based on it.
Yes. Even before he announced his candidacy, he made it very clear that this was going to be his central policy. He has time and time again told the police to continue the killings. He's told them if they're not brave enough to do it, that he would do it himself. And he's continued to incite these kind of killings. That makes him criminally liable for the result, which is more than 7,000 people dead. He also has failed to take any action to stop these killings. You know, I've gone to testify at the Yugoslav Tribunal, and I've worked with the International Criminal Court on many of their investigations. And the question they always ask me is not what crimes did you document, but did you send this report to the president? And is he aware of the allegations against him? And has he done something to stop it? Because if he has not acted to stop them, he and his justice minister and his attorney general and his police chief, if they don't act to stop these killings, they will be investigated by international authorities.
And what is the step for the International Criminal Court to come in and step in?
The step is when they determine that the Philippine authorities are not taking actions to stop these killings and are not taking actions to investigate these killings. And that is exactly what is happening right now. President Duterte has intimidated his critics, and he has surrounded himself with a justice minister and an attorney general who've refused to investigate these abuses. So that's why Human Rights Watch is calling on the UN to begin an international investigation into the crimes which are being committed in the Philippines.
You mentioned that Senator Laila de Lima, you felt, was being framed on politicized charges. What's your basis for saying that?
Well, it's clear that as soon as she called for hearings into what was happening in the drug war, President Duterte vowed that she would rot in jail. Those are his exact words. She's been subjected to a vicious campaign of slander, a misogynist campaign as well. If she has any charges to face, she should face them in a court which is fair and impartial, instead of being hounded out of power as the way she has, as a symbol to others who might want to speak out about the abuses which are taking place in the Philippines right now.
Journalists have also come under attack in this new environment. Has this come up in your investigation?
Certainly. You know, this is one of the very few reports issued by Human Rights Watch where we were not able to acknowledge the assistance that we received from many journalists and human rights activists. And the reason why we were not able to do that is because we feel that they are also under threat. President Duterte has told journalists that they could be next to be killed if they cross the line. And you see that in the reporting. Journalists have started to self-censor themselves when covering this story. They will report that 4 people were killed last night and that the police claim they were killed in a shootout, but they will not actually go the extra step anymore in many cases of conducting an investigation and accusing the police of carrying out an illegal killing because they know it's just too dangerous. And you can understand. When journalists night after night are standing at the scene of what they know are murders by the police, they have to consider their own safety if they criticize the police, because that's why our report is called License to Kill.
So one of the cases that you've looked at are people whose names come up in lists, and then they go to their homes, village officials go to their homes, and then they actually surrender and yet are still killed, right? So somebody who fears for their life, what options are available to them?
Well, this is the problem. They have very few options available to themselves. When they go to surrender, they're given a form to fill out, which says, A, I'm a drug dealer, or B, I'm a drug user. There's no option C saying they're innocent.
I'm innocent, yeah.
You know, so it's almost impossible for them to clear their names. And we had many cases in our report where people made every possible effort to save themselves. They went to the local barangay office time and time again, and they were sent home. They were told, come next week again.
Right.
Until a knock came on their door and people came to execute them inside their homes.
And from the investigations again, what is the end goal of all of this? Where do you see this heading?
Well, this is the question to ask the government. Are they really going to kill 3 million drug users? Are they considering the impact this is having on the families left behind? When in many of these cases, the person killed was the single breadwinner in the family, leaving behind a wife and young children. This is not going to resolve the drug challenges that the country is facing.
And even that number of 3 million drug users, and the Dangerous Drugs Board actually says it's 1.8 million.
Yeah.
So so it goes back.
In almost every case where a major drug dealer was involved that we investigated, the drug dealer bailed himself out of police custody. We had one case where a young boy was staying at the house of a drug dealing couple. The three of them were arrested together in Navotas. The drug dealing couple bribed the police to get released. The family of the young boy didn't have money. And that same evening at 6 p.m., he was found floating in a channel nearby. Just 50 meters from the barangay office where he was being kept. They didn't even make an effort to dump his body farther away. So that's the kind of impunity we see in these neighborhoods.
Your last thoughts here. I mean, in terms of the Human Rights Watch has been watching the Philippines for a very long time. After the martial law years, after the Marcos years, it took more than a decade to bring human rights back to the police and the military. What do you see moving forward now?
Well, I know exactly what President Duterte is going to say when he receives this report. He will say it's another report by foreigners meddling in the affairs of the Philippines. Our response is we care about the Philippines and we care about the people of the Philippines. And we're deeply distraught that 7,000 people have died in the last 6 months in the Philippines through extrajudicial killings. This has to stop.
Fantastic. Thank you. We've been
Thank you.
speaking with Peter Woodcourt of Human Rights Watch. The report is out, A License to Kill. Send your questions and your comments at Rappler.com and also at HRW, correct, on Twitter. I'm Maria Ressa. Thanks for joining us.